We picture cavemen huddling around fires, painting walls, hunting mammoths. But here's the problem nobody talks about. Fire dies, wind kills it, rain drowns it, snow buries it. And if you're moving camp across frozen tundra with your family and everything you own, one dead ember means death. So how did our ancestors carry living fire for thousands of miles without matches, without lighters, without anything we'd recognize? The answer sits in bog finds and cave floors, and it's stranger than you think. If you value documented prehistoric history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from archaeological studies and experimental archaeology reconstructions. Now back to the story. They didn't carry fire, they carried fungus. Fomes fomentarius, horsehoof fungus, tinder fungus. Call it what you want. This bracket fungus grows on birch trees across the northern world, and when you process it right, it becomes something incredible. Not tinder that catches fire. Tinder that holds fire. Smoldering for hours without flame, without smoke you can see. Carrying live coals inside dead-looking brown material that fits in your palm. The Tyrolean Iceman knew this. Otzi died 5,300 years ago in the Alps. And when they pulled him from the ice, he carried processed tinder fungus in his kit. Not random pieces, worked pieces. Someone had scraped away the hard outer layer, kept the spongy middle, and treated it with something that made it hold coals longer. Chemical analysis shows potassium nitrate, saltpeter, the same compound that makes gunpowder burn hot and steady. But Otzi lived in the Copper Age. Fire carrying goes back much deeper. Kesem Cave in Israel, 400,000 years ago. Thick ash layers and burned bones scattered across the floor. Tell you people controlled fire here for generations. But here's what matters. No hearthstones, no fire pits, no permanent fire setup. These people moved their fires. The ash spreads in patterns that match temporary camps. Not settled living. They carried coals from place to place and rebuilt fires wherever they stopped. How do you move coals without killing them? You wrap them in something that breathes but doesn't burn. Experimental archaeologist Harm Paulson spent 3 years testing prehistoric fire-carrying methods. Bark containers failed after 2 hours. Leather pouches smothered the coals in 4. Clay vessels cracked from heat shock, but processed fungus worked, wrapped in green leaves. Stuffed in a birch bark tube, it carried live coals for 8 hours of walking. The fungus smolders at 600 degrees Celsius internal temperature, but never flames. It feeds itself just enough oxygen to stay alive. The technique spreads across continents because it works. Kennewick man carried fire tools 9,000 years ago in the Pacific Northwest. His kit included processed fungus materials and the stone tools needed to work them. Analysis of organic residues on his scrapers matches compounds found in prepared tinder fungus. Same process, same chemistry. Different continent. Aboriginal Australians called it fire stick, not a stick. A bundle of processed bark and fungus that could carry coals for days across the outback. When James Cook's expedition reached Australia in 1770, they documented fire-carrying techniques still in use after 40,000 years. The materials changed, different trees, different fungi, but the principle held. Wrap live coals in processed organic material that burns slower than it feeds oxygen to the core. You can test this yourself. Cut horsehoof fungus from a birch tree, scrape away the hard crust, keep the brown spongy middle, boil it in wood ash water for 2 hours. The potassium compounds soak in, dry it completely, light a small coal and nestle it inside. Wrap the whole thing in green birch bark. Walk for 4 hours. Unwrap it. The coal still glows. Native Americans called it punkwood or touchwood, and every tribe that lived through winter had a version. The Inuit used dried moss and seal fat. Plains tribes used buffalo chips and processed inner bark. Mountain peoples used punky wood from lightning-struck pines, all different materials, all the same principle. Controlled combustion that starves fire down to coals, but never kills it completely. The real genius shows up in the containers, birch bark tubes found across northern Europe. Siberia and North America follow the same design pattern, 8 to 12 inches long, tight seams sealed with pine resin, small holes punched near one end for controlled airflow. These aren't random crafts. They're precision tools engineered for one job, keeping coals alive during long migrations. Archaeological sites from the last ice age show this technology everywhere humans lived. Cavemen Cave in Wales, 29,000 years ago. Red ochre burials and worked tinder materials in the same layers. Dolní Věstonice in Czech Republic, 30,000 years ago. Fired clay figurines and processed fire-carrying fungus in the same toolkits. These people didn't just use fire, they moved with it. The chemistry explains why it works. Tinder fungus burns at a specific rate, hot enough to stay alive, cool enough not to flame. The potassium compounds from wood ash act like saltpeter, controlling the burn rate. Green bark wrapping provides insulation and moisture regulation. The whole system creates a microenvironment where combustion continues but doesn't consume the fuel completely. Laboratory tests at the University of Cambridge proved this. Processed tinder fungus wrapped in birch bark and carried in controlled conditions maintained internal temperatures above 500 degrees Celsius for 12 hours, enough to restart a full fire, hot enough to survive rain, wind, and snow, cool enough not to burn through the container or hurt the person carrying it. But here's what changes everything. Recent excavations at Schöningen in Germany uncovered wooden spears 300,000 years old, older than modern humans. Homo heidelbergensis made these weapons. And scattered around the spear sites, they found it. Processed organic materials with the same chemical signatures as prepared tinder fungus. Pre-human hominids were carrying fire across Ice Age Europe before our species even existed. Fire carrying isn't human technology. It's survival technology that predates us. The skill passed through generations because losing it meant death. No fire meant no cooked food, no warmth, no protection from predators, no way to work stone tools in winter camps. Families that couldn't carry fire didn't survive the migrations. Natural selection for firekeepers. This changes how we picture prehistoric movement. Not desperate wandering, not random seasonal drifts, planned migrations with live coals carried like sacred flames from camp to camp across continents and through ice ages. Fire as inheritance. Fire as technology. Fire is the difference between human expansion and human extinction. Starcar in Yorkshire. 11,000 years ago, Mesolithic hunters left behind processed heather and birch inner bark soaked in animal fat. When archaeologists tested the materials, they burned for 14 hours without flame. Perfect for carrying between seasonal camps along the North Sea coast. The chemical analysis shows deliberate preparation. Bark stripped at the right season, heated with rendered fat at precise temperatures, dried in controlled conditions. The tools tell the story too. Specialized scrapers with wear patterns that match tinder fungus processing. Stone knives worn smooth from cutting birch bark to exact dimensions. Grinding stones with organic residues that match potassium-rich wood ash. These weren't multi-purpose tools. They were fire-tech manufacturing equipment, Pincevent in France. 15,000 years ago, Magdalenian reindeer hunters camped here during autumn migrations. They left behind fire-carrying kits that match designs found across Europe. Same bark tube dimensions. Same fungus processing marks, same resin sealing techniques, standardized technology shared across thousands of miles. But the French site shows something new. Backup systems. They carried primary fire in processed fungus containers, but they also carried secondary fire-making tools, flint, pyrit, prepared tinder, dry kindling wrapped in waterproof leather. If the coals died, they could restart fire in minutes instead of hours. Redundant systems that guaranteed survival even when everything went wrong. The Solutrean people took this further. 22,000 years ago, at the height of the last Ice Age, they developed fire-sharing networks across southern Europe. Archaeological evidence shows specialized firekeeper camps spaced exactly 1 day's travel apart along migration routes. Each camp stocked processed materials and maintained backup coals for passing bands. You can map the network from artifact distributions. Specific types of processed tinder fungus found only in certain regions show up hundreds of miles away at other firekeeper sites. They weren't just sharing technique, they were trading processed materials. Premium fire-carrying supplies moved along the same routes as flint tools and amber jewelry. The social organization around firekeeping gets complex fast. Ethnographic studies of Arctic peoples show how it worked. Firekeepers held specialist knowledge passed down through family lines. They knew which fungi worked best in different seasons, which trees produced the right bark, how to predict weather changes that could kill coals during transport. If you value documented prehistoric history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. Now back to the story. These specialists commanded respect equal to the best hunters or toolmakers. They married across band boundaries, spreading firekeeping genetics and knowledge through far-flung populations. DNA evidence from Ice Age skeletons shows maternal lineages with specific genetic markers appearing across continents, the signature of firekeeper women who traveled vast distances to share their skills. Mesmaiskaya Cave in the Caucasus Mountains. 45,000 years ago, Neanderthals processed tinder materials using techniques identical to later human methods. Same scraping patterns on tools, same chemical signatures in organic residues, same container designs recovered from cave floors. The technology predates modern human arrival in Europe by thousands of years. This rewrites human uniqueness claims. Fire carrying isn't what made us human. It's what made survival possible for multiple human species across Ice Age climates. Neanderthals, Denisovans, early modern humans, all used versions of the same technology because physics and chemistry don't change. Controlled combustion works the same way regardless of who discovers it. The Gravettian period shows peak fire-carrying sophistication. 28,000 years ago, across sites from France to Russia, archaeologists find identical fire tech innovations, improved container designs with internal chambers that separated fresh coals from spent material, specialized tools that could process 3 different types of tinder material for different weather conditions, backup lighting systems using animal fat lamps that burned for days. Kostenki in Russia preserves the most complete firekeeping toolkit ever found. 6 different types of processed tinder materials, 4 different container designs, stone tools worn smooth from processing organic materials, bone implements for managing coals inside bark tubes, clay vessels for rendering animal fat into slow-burning fuel. This wasn't survival technology anymore, it was engineering. The toolkit shows seasonal planning that spans entire years, summer materials processed and stored for winter migrations, different tinder preparations for wet season versus dry season travel, backup materials cached along known migration routes and recovered months later during return journeys. Carbon isotope analysis of charcoal from Gravettian sites reveals something incredible. The same individual coals traveled over 1,000 miles between sites. Not new fires started from old techniques. Actual living coals carried from camp to camp across entire continental distances. Fire as continuous inheritance linking scattered populations across time and space. But the Ice Age peak couldn't last forever. Climate change killed fire carrying faster than anything else. When temperatures warmed and forests returned, fire became abundant in the environment. No need to carry coals when you could find natural fires or start new ones anywhere. The specialized knowledge became unnecessary luxury instead of survival requirement. Archaeological evidence shows the transition happening fast. 15,000 years ago, fire-carrying technology appears at every major site across northern Europe. 12,000 years ago, it's rare. 10,000 years ago, it's almost gone except in the far north where conditions still demanded it. The last holdouts were Arctic peoples who faced conditions similar to Ice Age Europe. Traditional Inuit fire-carrying methods documented in the early 20th century match archaeological evidence from 30,000 years ago. Same materials when available, same processing techniques, same container designs. Continuous technological tradition surviving from the deep Ice Age into the modern world. But even there, it's fading fast. The last traditional firekeepers in northern Alaska died in the 1960s. Their children learned to use matches and lighters instead of processing fungus and managing coals. 40,000 years of survival technology vanished in a single generation. Modern military survival training tries to recover these techniques, but misses crucial details lost when the traditions died. You can read descriptions of fire-carrying methods, you can examine museum artifacts, you can even replicate the basic chemistry. But you can't recreate the intuitive knowledge that took lifetimes to develop. The exact hand pressure needed for processing fungus, the precise timing for harvesting materials, the subtle signs that warned when coals were dying. Experimental archaeologists come close. Ray Mears demonstrated functional fire carrying using museum specimens and historical accounts. His processed fungus burned for 6 hours during filmed tests, but traditional practitioners could achieve 12 to 16-hour burn times using techniques that died with them. The loss goes deeper than technology. Fire carrying required social systems that don't exist anymore. Extended families traveling together for months, children learning survival skills before they could walk properly, elders teaching specialized knowledge through hands-on practice across decades, community responsibility for maintaining skills that everyone depended on. Modern individualism makes this impossible to recreate. We can learn the techniques, but we can't rebuild the social context that made them work reliably under extreme conditions. Traditional firekeeping worked because entire communities committed to preserving and practicing the skills continuously. Recent discoveries keep revealing how sophisticated the technology became. Excavations at Malta in Siberia uncovered 24,000-year-old fire-carrying containers with internal mechanical systems, sliding wooden pieces that controlled airflow to coals, spring-loaded compartments that separated different grades of tinder material. Precision engineering that rivals modern survival equipment. The Siberian finds include something unprecedented: instruction artifacts, carved ivory pieces that demonstrate fire-carrying techniques in miniature, teaching tools that show the correct way to wrap coals, the proper method for sealing containers, the right materials for different weather conditions, Ice Age technical manuals designed to pass complex knowledge between generations. This suggests fire-keeping schools, specialized training sites where young people learned advanced techniques from master practitioners. The carved instruction pieces are too detailed and standardized to be casual artifacts. They represent formal education systems that preserved critical knowledge across centuries. DNA analysis of late Ice Age populations supports this interpretation. Genetic markers associated with fine motor skills and spatial reasoning cluster in populations from regions with the most sophisticated fire-carrying technology. Natural selection favored people with the cognitive abilities needed for complex firekeeping, creating bloodlines of specialist practitioners. But the clearest evidence comes from failure sites. Mass graves in northern Europe dating to the Younger Dryas cold period 12,000 years ago show what happened when fire carrying failed. Families that died together during winter migrations, bodies with signs of hypothermia and starvation. No processed fire carrying materials in their toolkits. They lost the technology at exactly the wrong time. The Younger Dryas brought Ice Age conditions back suddenly after thousands of years of warming. Populations that had abandoned fire carrying couldn't readapt fast enough. The specialist knowledge was gone. The social systems had dissolved. When they needed the old survival techniques most, they no longer existed. Archaeological evidence shows the demographic collapse clearly. Settlement sites occupied continuously for millennia, suddenly abandoned. Tool traditions that persisted through the worst Ice Age conditions disappearing within centuries. Population bottlenecks that match the timing of technological loss. Some groups survived by relearning fire carrying from Arctic peoples who never abandoned it. Genetic evidence shows population mixing between European groups and Siberian Arctic populations during the Younger Dryas. Knowledge transfer that saved some communities from extinction. But the relearned techniques were simpler than what was lost. The sophisticated container designs disappear from the archaeological record. The specialized toolkits become basic again. The formal instruction systems vanish. Survival knowledge, but not the engineering mastery that developed over thousands of years. The final chapter plays out in museum collections across Europe. Hundreds of fire-carrying containers and processed tinder materials collected from traditional peoples in the 18th and 19th centuries. Perfect preservation of technology that archaeologists are only now learning to recognize in prehistoric contexts. The museum pieces prove continuous technological descent from Ice Age innovations. Chemical analysis shows identical processing methods. X-ray imaging reveals the same internal container structures. Microscopic examination confirms the same tool wear patterns on associated equipment. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Recent excavation at a Norwegian glacier site uncovered a sealed cave with organic materials preserved in permafrost for 8,000 years. Inside, the complete fire-carrying kit of what appears to be the last traditional practitioner in Northern Europe. The kit contains processed tinder materials from 12 different plant species, 5 different container designs optimized for different travel conditions, instruction pieces carved with symbols that match artifacts found across Ice Age Europe, and something new, written records on birch bark using symbols that predate known writing systems by thousands of years. The symbols record fire-carrying techniques in precise detail, seasonal timing for material harvest, temperature and humidity requirements for processing, travel distances achievable with different container loads, technical specifications that match the most sophisticated archaeological finds from across the Ice Age world. This isn't random survival knowledge. It's the culmination of 40,000 years of technological development preserved by practitioners who knew their tradition was ending. The last masters of Ice Age firekeeping, recording everything they knew before the knowledge died with them. The cave site is still being excavated. Each season reveals more evidence of sophisticated firekeeping traditions that survived far longer than anyone imagined. The techniques that carried our ancestors across continents and through climate catastrophe, preserved in perfect detail by people who understood exactly what they were losing. Human survival balanced on glowing coals wrapped in fungus, carried by specialists who held the difference between life and death in their hands.